Our lunch, joining us on the line now to discuss Heineken's rejection of SABMiller's takeover bid and the implications of Scottish independence, of course, is Chris Gilmour, ex of Scotland, now of South Africa, currently investment analyst at Absa Investments. Sorry to throw that thing in about the Scots independence, Chris, but maybe we can get that out the way first. I doubt if you had a vote, or if you do have a vote, would you go yes or no?
Well, I don't have a vote. It's only people who live there and who are on the electoral roll who get it, so I don't get a vote. But if I did there, I'll tell you quite categorically I would vote yes, and without a shadow of a doubt.
Wow. That would be against all economic wisdom, or perceived anyway.
Well, not at all. I mean, if you look at what would happen, and you see, you've got to strip the emotion out of this. I mean, none of this has got to do with anti-English sentiment at all. It's really to do with people being in control of their own affairs. And I think, you know, Brian Cox, the actor, put it very well on Amanpour on Friday evening, and he was saying, if you look at what happened with the floods in Somerset at the beginning of this year, those poor devils down there, I mean, they're even now still struggling from the after effects of it. Had they been able to have control over their own destiny, they could have sorted the situation out much, much quicker. The Westminster government dillied and dallied, and it was an appalling situation. But on a bigger scale, if you look at Scotland, and if it had its own oil revenues coming in, oil is still a very, very big factor there. And when you divide it through by 5 million people, it makes a huge difference. Take Norway, across the North Sea. It's the second richest country in the world after Luxembourg on a per capita GDP basis. Its sovereign wealth fund, if I'm not mistaken, Heineken, you know better than I do on subjects like this, I think it's worth between, what, 500 billion and $1 trillion US. It's massively wealthy. So it's all to do with having a small population, an entrepreneurially based population, and large mineral and other wealth. So no, look, it's purely on the economics. It would be the 14th richest country in the world under independence. It's really got very little to do with emotion and everything to do with finance and economics.
Well, I'm sure David Cameron is very glad that you aren't in Scotland fighting for Mr. Salmon and co. But getting to the other reason why we asked you to come through here, Chris, and I know you know SABMiller better than probably any other analyst in the country. This bid for Heineken, it is a strange, from the outset, a strange breaking news to come through over the weekend, because the Heineken family is in control of the Heineken company. So if they were always going to want independence, why would SABMiller try anyway?
I suspect, Alec, and you make the point very well there, I mean, and I agree with you entirely, and I suspect it's a kind of last-ditch effort by SABMiller to try and put off the possibility of being absorbed into Anheuser-Busch InBev. As you rightly say, I mean, the Charlene de Carvalho Heineken, Freddie Heineken's daughter, she and her husband, you know, they shy away from publicity, and they've got a very interesting structure in which they hold their controlling stake in Heineken. It's a bit like the Pickwick Pick and Pay structure, the pyramid. They've got what, half of Heineken Holdings, which in turn owns what, 25 or 50% of Heineken. So, you know, they can block pretty much anything. And they do love their independence. They're incredibly wealthy people. She's worth, at the last valuation, about $12 billion US, so it's not like she needs the money. And in the bid that we hear the machinations that were made, they would have ended up in an enlarged SABMiller Heineken operation with about 14% of the shares. Altria would have about 24%, and the Santo Domingo family, the people who previously owned Bavaria, would have had about 11%. So the question is, did they want to be the masters of a smaller company, you know, which is about half the size of SABMiller, I guess, or did they want to have a 14% of the enlarged company? Charlene de Carvalho Heineken, she's never expressed any real desire to be a controlling force in the actual business, the operations as such. Yes, they want to be independent, but they're not really that close to the operational side of things. But I think it's this independent side that really gnaws away at them. So I don't think SAB were ever really on a winning ticket on this one, and that's why I say I think it was more of a kind of desperate attempt to try and stave off absorption into AB InBev than anything else.
And how imminent is that?
Well, it's not imminent. I've said it's going to take a year or two. However, this may well catalyze AB InBev into action now. Because, you know, if by some quirk, they managed to persuade the minorities in Heineken that it would be in their interests to go with this deal. In terms of volume, a combined Heineken SAB would be bigger than AB InBev, although not in profitability. AB InBev is an enormously profitable company, so it would still be some way off that. But what it would do, it would make it remarkably indigestible. So I think with that possibility in mind, it might just spur the AB InBev guys into action and say, listen guys, we really need to get on with this one now, sooner rather than later. And at this point in time where organic growth around the world is increasingly difficult to come by, a merger and acquisition of this size, which would actually result in a company which would be bigger than Procter & Gamble. I mean, this would be one of, if not the largest consumer companies in the world, an AB InBev SABMiller agglomeration. I think they might just go for it sooner rather than later now.
So hence the increase in the SABMiller share price today, a big jump, 4.5%. But there's another thought that as they have been rejected by Heineken, doesn't this push SAB into the arms of Diageo?
Yes, Diageo makes a bit more sense, I think. Look, it's a different thing altogether, Alec, in the sense that you're now looking at a drinks company rather than just a pure beer play here. SAB does have a bit of experience of that. You know, they've got their passive stake in Distell. But at the same time, it would be more difficult, and yet at the same time probably easier to actually consummate such a thing. And of course, the big prize for them within Diageo would be Guinness, which is something that they would probably quite dearly like to get their hands on, particularly in West Africa. So yes, that would probably make more sense in the short term. But I don't know if that would make it big enough to make it indigestible for AB InBev.
Fascinating insights there from Chris Gilmour, not just on SABMiller, but he's a man who understands economics and very forcefully in favour of the yes vote in Scotland. That happens on Thursday. Many people around the world are watching to see if the Scots get their independence from the United Kingdom. Well, it could have some kind of knock-on effect in many other countries in the world. Spain, who knows, even parts of Africa.